We did at least attempt in the old days to tell both sides of a story. Good news editors would say, you haven't got the other side of the story, where is it? We're not publishing till it's there. And I would say that to young journalists. And the trouble, I think, with the polarising nature of social media is that there is never two perspectives. Is one perspective, and it's instant, and it's very often unthoughtful. And I think that's my biggest sadness about the information era that we're in. Lynmore was a great place to grow up and live, but it was very rural in our day. We were very sporty. We had yachts and we sailed. And you could stand up in most of Lake Rotorua. I recall my brother and I having a huge row, us capsizing, and he just sailed off and left me there. I went to Rotorua Girls High. At that time, I didn't think it was a happy school. I wrote a letter to the paper about how bad the school was, made the mistake of signing my own name. I was suspended and I never went back. Mum had always had a strong sense of sort of social justice. I just think that rubbed off. When I think about it, I probably became a protester when I wrote the letter to the paper. Had I had parental guidance, I might not have written that. But then life would have been very dull. I wanted to be a reporter, and the Daily Post didn't have vacancies for girls in those days. I went off to training college and then on to Waikato University, BA in coffee drinking and student protest. And then we started Nexus, which was a scurrilous student newspaper, the most sued student newspaper of all time. We just used to put the writs in the drawer because we had no money, so it didn't matter. For a long period of time, I was the Auckland correspondent for the Dominion, which was a fantastic job because I could choose the stories that I wanted to write. I remember having 2 hours with Margaret Thatcher when she visited New Zealand. It took 2 hours to get that coiffure rigid enough on her head for her to be able to undertake her social engagements. It was fantastic. The Maori Land March I covered extensively. It was a monumental time. We'd finally reached the Auckland Harbour Bridge, and the fact that the bridge moved beneath our feet was sort of symbolic. I eventually joined the Sunday News. I was news editor and then editor for a time, and from there I went to the Auckland Star as editor. When I was finally sacked at the Star for not wanting to take it tabloid, I went back to Palmerston North, lay under the duvet crying for a couple of weeks. I became chair of Palmerston North Enterprise Board, and Annette King had just been ousted. I thought she'd make a damn good CEO. She was lying under the duvet crying, encouraged her to come to Palmerston North, and in that time she wanted to stand again for Parliament. So I ran her campaign and wrote my PhD off how you run a political campaign. I was particularly proud of my bumper sticker, which was "Vote for a King." We got her in by the slimmest of margins, and I got my PhD out of it. The Human Rights Commission established an Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner role, which I applied for and got. We looked at aged care employment throughout the land. I met a woman who ran an agency that provided workers to aged care facilities. She said, "Oh, I could get you in, you've been a journalist, haven't you?" And she said, "Here's the uniform," and did 3 weeks in an aged care facility, working as a buddy carer. The Aged Care Association is a very powerful lobby, and it had been following the inquiry with great interest because, of course, it was in its interests to dampen any public concern that the inquiry report might fuel. But what they hadn't counted on was that I had gone undercover, and I did write a personal diary in which I described it as modern-day slavery and said that I just simply couldn't do the job. I wasn't strong enough. I didn't have the emotional resilience. I remember visiting a very old woman, and she was sitting all dressed up on her bed with her suitcase packed, ready to go home. And of course, there was no hope of her going home. And the workers, honestly, were just heroic in that they'd turn up every day for minimum wages and, of course, reluctant to withdraw their labour for higher wages because it would leave their patients exposed. No one was particularly happy about me doing it. Commission was a little bit startled itself, but you can't really dismiss a report that's got first-hand experience in it. In 2017, government entered into that remarkable historical remedial agreement. The tragedy is, though, that carers have now slipped back again, so some of them now are starting on the minimum wage again. So the fight is still not won.